Okay, thank you everybody for coming out for the second Farm Talk. So once again, we are joined with Rodney and Rob Holly of Blue Lizard and Holly Family Farms, and we're going to have a good conversation about some of the lessons learned from their practice and their operations. Um, the last one we sort of just went based on what everyone's questions were. This one I was hoping that we could be a little targeted, and since we have been dealing with some heavy aphid pressure, if we could talk through integrated pest management, what it means, how you achieve it on your operation, and what should everyone be aware of when they're looking to make decisions about how to address pests on their property. So if that is acceptable to y'all, maybe we can just go ahead, Rodney, if you want to talk a little bit about how you do IPM.
I used to own a pest control company, and we used integrated pest management quite a bit to solve problems. So you really need to look at the picture as a big picture of what's going on and what's causing the problem. Um, Things like exclusion, if you're in a greenhouse, trying to keep your greenhouse um, sealed off from the outside environment. That really helps keep insects from coming in. I've even heard of some greenhouses having double doors. So you got a door to come in, you close, and then you open the door to the greenhouse to get inside to where you're growing plants. Don't disregard these steps. They're really important. Obviously, with aphids, try to bring ladybugs in, although I've had challenges sometimes with keeping them in the greenhouses and alive. I grow alfalfa as a cover crop, and that really brings um, a lot of aphids to the farm. Or not, sorry, not a lot of, it brings a lot of aphids to the farm, sorry, but it also brings a lot of ladybugs. And I find that the ladybug population is able to explode in a sense because they have lots of food from the alfalfa, and they transfer quickly into the greenhouses as competition increases. They move in. I constantly find ladybug pupa um, mounted on all sorts of objects in the greenhouse, from wood to a tool that's left behind. So I know they're reproducing and growing. Um, Keeping your hoop houses or greenhouses or even your fields um, weed control can bring insects, and so either material to suppress or whatever you're using on your field to suppress the weeds. Keeping the weeds mowed down really helps. Um, and those that may use herbicides, apply a herbicide along the edges just to keep the pressures down off your fields. Um, let's see. And then when you have to get, hold on just a second. Oh, I think I can remember, but when you have to get into spraying, I try to reach for Asmax first. It's a growth regulator. It's um, an anti-feedant and an insecticide. Um, that really helps. You can also mix that with an organic pyrethrum to to get a knockdown kill, soap and water, um, BT for worms. Um, that's inevitable in Nevada when you're growing cabbage or other brassicas. Flea beetles. Flea beetles are a real big issue. Um, I can grow mustards or mustard plant, or what we call our super mix in the hoop houses. Um, but as soon as it gets warm and the mustards in the environment perish because of the heat, man, they are right on my mustard mixes, and so I can't grow them. So you just have to stay on top of spraying them. You can with the I know this is outside of aphids, but I think it applies in how you got to think. You can grow crops mustards outside that attract flea beetles, and then you treat those areas that's not intended to be harvested for food and kill those insects off before their populations build and become a problem inside your hoop houses. And I'm sure there's a lot more that we can go over, but that's kind of an overview, quick overview of what I do on the farm.
Thank you so much. Rob, like to,
I'll reiterate what Rodney said about alfalfa. I've always been around alfalfa. It has weevils, it has aphids to a degree, but it also, because of those, has a large population of ladybugs, lacewings, and other things that prey on those insects, parasitic wasps. Um, so part of the whole idea of IPM, especially in an environment that tries to use little or no synthetic herbicides and pesticides, is you have to have harmful insects to feed the beneficial insects. So you're looking for a balance there. If you don't have a single aphid, you're not going to have a single prey species to prey upon it. And that's the only way you really attain that, is in a real sterile environment that uses a lot of chemicals. So so you're looking for a balance that leans probably more toward the beneficials than the harmfuls, but you don't have the beneficials without some aphids or without some other things, and there's so many things involved in it, and Rodney touched on a lot of them. We have tumble mustard all over the Intermountain West. And anywhere you're driving in the springtime, you see those pretty white butterflies flying around. And those pretty white butterflies are the adults of the little inchworms that end up leaving your kale like someone went through there with buckshot. And so controlling those plants in the surrounding areas helps establish a buffer, because whether it's with the cabbage worms, the white butterflies, they're different than cabbage loopers, but it's the same principle. All those natural brassicas and mustard crops are, there's thousands of acres of that growing around the region, that so we can't get rid of the main population. And when that those plant materials die out, those insects look for the next source of food. Same thing happens with leaf hoppers. Once the desert vegetation dries out, they all find a new home in a high tunnel or a field crop right next to it. So controlling those populations outside of the production area is really, really, really important. And one thing that I try and do, I'm kind of like a kid, a little boy. I like reptiles and amphibians. I love to see frogs and snakes and lizards around the garden, because they'll eat the adults, they'll eat the young, of course, the toads. We have a lot of Western toads here, and they'll eat the earthworms when they come out. The night crawlers come out at night. That's really what their primary food source is. So I look at the toads as an indicator that I've got a lot of worms in my garden soil. And so that's a good thing. Even though they eat a lot of those worms, there's a lot more in there. The snakes. This year's a terrible year for rodent pests, and the desert has been verdant and healthy and green the last few years, and when the desert's healthy, the rodents that live there, the voles, the field mice, the kangaroo rats, the wood rats, they're all healthy too. So you can't have one without the other. It's just trying to find a balance that leans towards the beneficial species that are going to help you control the pest species. And then there's some other resources too, because sometimes you need to apply something to help you get ahead. There's a lot of different things to use. We use BT for the cabbage loopers and the cabbage worms and tomato worms. It works really well if applied at the right time for the tomato worms. They're
The right time would be,
pardon?
what was the right time?
Late June is when I like to do it in late June for the tomato worms. They're usually you don't notice a lot, at least here, we don't notice a lot of damage from the hornworms until we get into July. And a lot of times when they're really big and they're just full of chewed up tomato stuff, it takes a lot of BT to kill something that's 3 or 4 inches long. But if you get them when they're smaller, it'll take care of the younger worms, and it works really well. That's something I learned from the apple guy Michael, there in North Reno. It was in his newsletter a few years ago, and that's worked really well. And of course, it also works for the other worm pests. The I'm still not sure what to do this year. We've had grasshoppers at times in biblical proportion. It's been a little overwhelming. They wiped out our outside kale, and it's just now recovering. But for a while, it looked like just skeletons out there. So, and that's a challenge because they're really mobile. They fly, they come and they go, and there's some things that we haven't gotten a good handle on. Squash bugs is another one they're really difficult to manage. The most success we had was at our former farm. We had a lot of guinea hens, and the guinea hens will wander through the garden and they'll peck them out of the squash plants. And we thought about getting guinea hens again, but they're really hard on high tunnels. They have sharp feet and they like to fly up on things, and so they'll cause a different set of mechanical issues with crawling around on the plastic tunnels. And it's difficult to fix the top of a plastic tunnel when it gets a hole in it. But guinea hens will work for squash bugs. They really will. They'll go through there and they'll pick a lot of them out. We have a challenge here with quail, and that's where, as Rodney alluded to it, is just exclusion. For 2-3 weeks, I couldn't figure out where my lettuce was going. I thought maybe it's ants, but we didn't have any harvester ants nearby, and I couldn't figure it out. Then yesterday, my wife said, "Rob, we had quail and hoop too. Well, could that be what was happening to the lettuce?" Well, and this whole IPM thing, we use sheep in the garden to clean up the weeds when everything freezes. Well, the sheep, when they get crowded, they were stepping on the low end of the plastic. So we had about a 4 or 5 foot tear on some plastic that we were going to replace right above the baseboard. Well, the covey of quail was coming and going at will. And we figured that out yesterday. We put some tape up. I'm going to have to reseed my arugula because they found it yesterday afternoon. It's half gone. But there's always something. But exclusion is a big thing. Insect netting helps a lot with the cabbage loopers. It helps with leaf miners, with chard, and a little bit with kale. Is just having them in a little darker environment where the adult flies can't get in and out and don't feel comfortable in the shade. Arbico. I was going to mention Arbico Organics. They have a catalog online, and you can look up organic approved control measures by Pest. The labels are there. It's a great place to start if you're having a particular challenge with an issue. They are a good source for insects and a number of good quality, Omni approved, organic approved herbicides and pesticides that you can use in organic production. So Arbico Organics is a great resource.
That's great, thank you. And it sounds like obviously it's always a balance. managing between the effort required versus what's the impact of the pest. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about how you set those kind of control levels or pressure levels. When do you know that there is enough pest pressure on a crop that you need to take some action? How do you make those decisions in terms of your kind of more active management of that? Rodney, if you want.
We see a lot of the washer I have washes a lot of the aphids and other insects off, and it even pushes them to the edge, and they stick to the stainless steel, and I can tell by the pressure or how much is there about what the pressure level is. You're never going to be 100% pest free in your finished product, but you can certainly get it to a level at which people don't see it. Um, and and so my threshold is when they get to a level in which they're causing damage. I don't often get there with say spinach or spring mix, because we cut those once a week. And so when we cut those, we're removing those insects. They're going through the wash and die. But very quickly, as the leaves grow back, they come back on. Um, with the mustard mix that I grow as a salad mix, um, I sometimes just stop planting it because the flea beetles are so bad that it doesn't. I can't consciously apply that much pesticide to control them and still come up with a safe product, right? Even if it's organic, people want to think that organic, organic, um, uh, um, organic certification means no pesticides. It doesn't mean no pesticides. It just means approved pesticides that they deem to be safe. And so, being an old pest control guy, I'm very cautious about what I spray. Um, and then just getting on top of things early, just like uh, what has already been said. The sooner you get on top of stuff, the faster you can keep it out of in control, and the less reproduction that occurs. You don't get a explosion in product or in insect population. Did I cover everything that you were hoping for
Oh,
there?
yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Robbie, you got anything to add?
Oh,
Oh, hi,
yeah.
Ray.
Hello, Ray.
Well, hi there.
How
Hey,
are you,
Ray.
sir?
Hey, I thought I was doing pretty good till I tried to get into the Zoom meeting.
Ah,
Oh,
I
you
didn't
hear
I didn't know you were using the same thing over and over and over. I had no idea.
that? All right,
Password and all that stuff.
That's actually a really good point, Ray. So for like Kyle and those who were here last time, and anyone who wants to join, it's going to be the same information.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just use
Great.
that same one.
Okay, you learn something new every
We're
day. That's
learning.
good. That's good. So, yeah, I've had a pretty good day so far. I made a BLT sandwich for lunch using our yellow taxi tomatoes. I think I died and went to heaven. It was absolutely fantastic.
just had my first tomato from Rob's seedling that he sold me. It was exquisite. It's ruined all other tomatoes for me. So we're having a conversation on IPM and pest management and pest control. So we're just talking about how we make kind of the decisions about when to take management action. How do you assess how much pest pressure there is? So Rob was just about to drop some knowledge.
indeed. Let's see. Back to it ties in again with what Rodney was saying, and certainly, and you're right, absolutely right, Rodney. In organic production, there are herbicides and pesticides, products that you can use for pest control. And they're distinctly, in most cases, different from what you might see used in a conventional farming environment, like 2,4-D, for instance. It's just not used in an organic system. It's a broadleaf herbicide. It's very common in grain production, seed production, hay production with grass pastures for your weed-free hay. Broadleaf herbicides are really commonly used. So there's a lot of differences, but yes, basically an herbicide or pesticide is something that you're using to target an unwanted plant or animal. It could be a fungicide. As far as the threshold goes, because we like to use biological controls, we buy ladybugs that they I don't know where they get them, but they come out of Reno. They're in a little pint thing with a fluorescent orange lid. They're hardy and healthy. They do a great job. And so for me, I can't let my pests get very far ahead, or the beneficial insects won't be able to catch up. And so when I start seeing aphid pressure, and for us it tends to be in our kale, sometimes in our lettuce and arugula, but like Rodney said, we cut it every week, so they don't get a foothold there. And if they do, we'll just clear out that bed and start it again, because those are products that are ready in fairly short order. But if we start seeing it in the kale, seeing them in the peppers, which are the two areas where we get aphid pressure, I'll immediately start doing ladybug releases. I'll do it at night so that they don't follow the sun and take off into the wild blue yonder. And plus with high tunnels, it helps them kind of stay put. They'll be all up along the plastic, trying to get out, but they can't. And eventually they find their way back into the plants. So for us, the threshold of pest pressure is pretty low, because we're trying to use things that are completely unharmful, but they're not broadly immediately effective. If we do need to make an application of BT, for instance, I can use that and mix it in with a foliar fertilizer. But things like pyganic, which is it's a natural pyrethroid. But you don't want your lettuce to taste like daisies and chrysanthemums. And so even those products, although they're not harmful, they might leave a residue that affects the quality of that product. So we try not to, but we try and adjust the rates and the timing so that we don't have that be an issue. That's something to really look out for. And the same with any sort of foliar applied anything. It's made from minerals, animal byproducts, soy waste, fish waste, and it neither tastes nor smells good. So and it's darker in color. It can be, so you have to be careful how you mix those things also. But our threshold is low, and we start immediately making releases of ladybugs anytime things look like they're even approaching a problem, because aphids reproduce exponentially, and before long you're totally overwhelmed, and all the ladybugs and parasitic wasps in the world will still take a couple weeks to get you caught back up. And so walking through, I look when I pick, and people will do pest walks. That's one reason I like to pick cherry tomatoes. It's like every plant goes to the spa and gets a checkout, because I'll go down and spend a couple hours picking cherry tomatoes off of every plant. And so we try to incorporate, now that we're in harvest season, our inspections with our harvest. And that works pretty well. Before things are ready, you do have to go walk through and look for problems before harvest season. But we try and integrate that into other garden processes.
Ray, do you want to add? So we sort of walked through kind of the basics of IPM, but anything about how you have, what you've learned, how you deal with it, what threats you face?
Okay, I agree 100% with Rob and the ladybugs, and we have used those for years in our hoop houses and have very good results. We haven't mentioned our pest that is outside on our zucchini, and you all know what that is. Yeah, that's a squash bug. Okay. I've used diatomaceous earth on them. The end result is, for me anyway, is temporary, very temporary results. I don't normally, in fact, we've gone years without using the perithrum, but I had to do it this year. Squash bugs just moved on in and tried to take over, and I had to do the perithrum. And I even had to order some more because I ran out. Normally one little container will do, anything I need for the year because we don't usually have that big of a problem. But this year, if it's not a weed, it's a squash bug. So you take your choice. Right now I'm letting the weeds do their thing and just trying to control the squash bug.
Moving to a slightly different target. I know, Rodney, you talked about managing your weeds to keep the pest pressure down. And then, Ray, I was wondering if you could take a chance to talk about your experience using bindweed mites. I know you had a problem with those and were able to get some from Colorado.
Okay, thank you for asking. We just, week ago, 2 weeks ago, we just received bindweed mites from Palisades, Colorado, from the experimental station there. And I have used these, at least 10 or 12 years ago, maybe longer, I can't remember. And what it is they will send you through the state Department of Ag. It has to go through an ED, what is it? EDU type thing. They won't send them to the individual. And a gal by the name of Andrea came out and she helped put the bindweed mite in with a patch of bindweed that I have. And what it is a string of bindweed. And you're winding that into the bindweed that you have. And I'm watering it. Yeah, that sounds crazy, absolutely crazy. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grow more bindweed mites so I can take and cut more strands and put them out there in the other bindweed patches. And it does work. It is not a instant fix. It is something that you have to keep up with over probably 1 to 2 years because the bindweed's not gonna go away. You know, you stop watering it, it'll die out, but the minute you water, it'll come back again. So, like I say, it's a 1 to 2, maybe 3 year process. And so we're just getting started with it right now. And because it's been a long time since we've done this. And of course, the bindweed comes back over the years. It did do a good job 10, 12 years ago. It wiped out a pretty good sized patch. And I haven't had a real problem there since. But I haven't put water on it either. So we shall see.
No water is a good way to keep it.
Does that
I
help?
find it-
Does that help you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I just find it so fascinating how you're balancing all of these different ecological responses and pressures, and how you make a small adjustment or introduce something new to address something. I want to take a second, Kristen. Sorry, I know you went off camera, but I did want to open it up to the floor if you had a question, or if anyone else did. Jolene, Tatum, about pest pressure, or just any topic. Just give it a second. She might be gone. Jolene, did you have anything you want?
No, I did text. We have a new AmeriCorps employee named Jess, and she's very interested in joining. She's interested in becoming a farmer, and so it's really exciting because it's the first time Reno Food Systems has had an AmeriCorps person. So she said she couldn't join today, but she is going to be able to join in 2 weeks' time. So it's kind of a fun little update. And then we have 2 more employees named Joe and Peter. And I think that what I was kind of telling them is I feel like this is a really great opportunity for beginning farmers, to come and talk to I mean, how many years of farming do we have here? Rob, Rodney, and Ray? Is it 100?
I have no
Well,
idea. I
make
don't
me
keep
feel
count.
old.
I'm not 100 yet.
Combined.
So,
I think it's I think it's wise, not old.
hey Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
can we were talking about beneficials.
Yes. Oh, please.
Okay, when our gal was here from Nevada Department of Ag, we talked about a puncture vine weevil. Okay, now I have a good idea that everybody out there has got these beautiful puncture vines that get into your shoe. Yeah, yeah. So, and all you can do is cut them off and collect them and that type of thing, and they grow back every year. About 20 years ago, we sampled a weevil that was just, was being developed for this purpose. And Andrea is trying to get these out of, I believe it's Utah. I may be wrong on that, but there's a place that she has made contact with that can get this weevil, and so hopefully that's going to be introduced here at Custom Gardens this year. Because I'm sick and tired of pulling those puncture vines out of my shoes.
Great.
Hurt and all. But that's something I know everybody has, and if we can take and use a beneficial to deal with that, I think we are, miles and miles ahead. That's all I got.
Thank you. Rob, did you have something to add?
Yeah, the puncture vine, goat heads, a lot of people call them. It's a terrible, terrible weed. And we almost we thirst for mid-season thunderstorms, and of course they need moisture in the summer and 90-degree soil. And now it's August, and we have puncture vine after the rain we had a couple weeks ago. We in our non-crop areas, I don't know what it is about them. They're a pretty low green plant, and about the time they start getting the little yellow blooms on them, we'll turn in my son's sheep, and sheep will like to eat them, and they'll eat the seeds if they've developed before they dry. So that has been really effective in our driveway and parking areas and down where we keep our livestock. Is we'll turn the sheep out and they'll do that. In the garden, it's a little bit different. One thing that I've found works if they go to seed is to stay out of that area where you get this plant and it's 5 feet across, and it's got a lot of, you can pull it up carefully from the root and dispose of it and burn it. And then I was taking just a propane torch that we use for weed burning, and you have to make sure you don't start a fire and have any fuels that'll take it elsewhere. But I found a spot last fall, and I just torched those things right on the ground. It burns off the the horns, the sticker part of them, and the intense heat I think destroyed a lot of the seeds, and it was fun to do. So so that's a suggestion. If you have an area where it's safe to take a propane torch and just smoke them, and that worked well for us. That and sheep. Otherwise, they are just they're a challenge, and they're a challenge in the crop areas, especially. You just have to pick them when you see them and not let them get ahead of you.
Well, I'm going to make everybody jealous here real quick. I don't have squash bugs. I've had them once
Oh,
and I skipped a year and I haven't seen them since, and I've grown squash several years in a row. And it's just that I'm not close to town, to Caliente. I'm about 7 miles away from both of my communities that have them. So I cross my fingers every year that I don't get them. Um, so I've been pretty blessed that way. We just sent 500 pounds of zucchini and summer squash to Home Feed Nevada this morning. Um,
That's it.
so yeah, I'm stoked about that. And yeah, I don't have an answer for bindweed or 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 the what were we talking about? The sticker?
Puncture vine.
Puncture vine, yeah. Um, they just kind of get everywhere. I try to control them as much as I can uh, um, around the farm where I see them coming up. Um, something that we do need to recognize for like bindweed or morning glory, it is a toxic plant, and it likes to grow and come up through the greens. And so my crew is usually recognizes that, and they know it's poisonous. So we really look for it when we're packing our greens. Now, that said, it would take somebody to eat a pound of it before they could really do some damage. So if you end up with a little bit in your mix, it's not the end of the world. Um, but we just need to recognize that it's a pest, a weed pest that we need to make sure we keep out of our mix, and because it can be toxic.
I have a question on that. There's always a trade-off between how much work you are able to do to remove a pest or a invasive plant versus how much of an impact it has on the production and whether you're going to be able to finish harvesting before it begins to have an impact. So I don't have any specific question on there, but do any of you have some thoughts on how you make those assessments? How do you decide whether something is going to require aggressive treatment, or if it's something that you can get the harvest done and then plow it under and it will be more under control that way?
Yeah, for bindweed, plowing it is not the answer. It just
Okay.
breaks the vines up, and those vines will resprout, and it'll spread and make new colonies. Um, for us, when we know what beds we have bindweed in, and we try to control them early on, get them at their roots, pull them out, to exhaust that root base. But we're never 100% in a year, and so we assess the bed when we're cutting it. That's our first step. The second step is when we're feeding it through our washer. We've got sets of eyes that as the greens come up the conveyor belt and it's being fed, we're looking for these and pulling these plants out. On the packing table, we have 2 to 3 sets of eyes. As we clean it, we remove it, and the last person that puts the mix in the bag is looking at it. So the more eyes as we go along, the better we are in the end. And so it's real important for us to teach employees and these are not the plants that are allowed in our mix. Now that said, sometimes I get a flush of a lamb's quarter, which is essentially a wild spinach. And if it's really thick in my spring mix, why I leave it in there. And if it's tender and young, I leave it in there and I'll call it spring mix with wild spinach or some creative name. And it's certainly edible and should be eaten. And um, and so I just changed the name and we ship it on.
Robert Ray, anything to add on?
Nope. He covered it.
Yep, I eat a lot of lamb's quarter in the spring while I'm picking greens. We don't have a lot of it because we generally treat it as a weed, but I eat a lot of lamb's quarter. Purslane's not really good by itself, but it's kind of fun knowing what edible plants you have in your garden that are naturally growing there. And yeah, the lamb's quarter is marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous to eat in the spring. It makes a nice salad.
Tumbleweed is also in its young state an edible weed, an edible plant. So if it's there or gets in the mix, but you obviously it gets spiny as the older it gets, so you got to get it young.
Yeah, yeah. And we have that. It's kind of there's a lot of different considerations. How close is a bed ready to turn and replant? And or are you looking at a longer crop like tomatoes or peppers, where you want that whole plant to be healthy until it freezes essentially, or until August or September when you might put in some fall greens? So those are some considerations when you have weed pests coming into a bed, is kind of weighing this, how much profit is left in that bed versus how hard is it going to be and how much time is it going to take me to get it all cleaned out. And a lot of times we harvest our lettuce by hand. That's not our primary crop in the summer. So as we're going through with scissors, it's a good time after you cut in an area to get the weeds out. If you pull them out before you cut, then you get dirt in your lettuce and you have quality issues. But if you cut it and you've kind of marked those, and then you can pull those weeds and as the lettuce regrows, that dirt won't be a factor. That's something that we look at. But a lot of times with greens, with arugula, with things like a radish bed where you might get 2 or 3 weeks of harvest from the same planting, it gets to a point where you're better off just to muck it all out and plant something else. And each crop varies, so it's really hard to quantify. But the longer a person grows, I think the better they're able to make that decision. It's like, nah, we're just better off to till it in, cut it out, do whatever you do when you flip a bed, and start over again. One thing I've noticed too, and it's the case in Lincoln County where Rodney is. It's certainly the case here where we're at, in and around Silver Springs, where Ray farms, and in many places where people are producing vegetables. There are areas that were, even if it was decades ago, there are areas that were previously in some other form of agricultural production, or they had alfalfa nearby. You can grow alfalfa on 10 acres in the desert anywhere if you have water. And when you look at field bindweed, the common dodder that we get, that's a carrot colored fibrous, it looks like carrot colored silly string that someone sprayed all over your crop. It's terrible. But those weed pests are here because they have a real close relationship with alfalfa production. A few years ago, we were driving to Las Vegas, and we're going down Highway 95, and we're driving along, and both sides of the road are all of the creosote bush, which is that northern Mojave Basin shrub. It's an ugly shrub, but well, it's not ugly. It's Mojave Desert. I'm sorry, but it was all full of dodder, and I'm like, where did this come from? But then when you look off to the southwest, at the end of that valley is the north end of the Amargosa Valley, and it had worked across with the wind from the alfalfa fields in the Amargosa Valley. We have it here in Dayton. It's very common. And, and it's one of those things, it's a terrible weed. You just have to pick it out by hand, pretty much, not let it germinate. It'll germinate, and as soon as it gets attached to a host plant, the roots cut off and it lives off the host plant. It's a hideous weed, really. If it goes too far and it flowers and it seeds, the seeds will remain persistent for years and years in the soil. And then you get a good rainy spring like we had this year or last year, and that seed will germinate. And you'll see it moving through the sagebrush community, through alfalfa fields. It likes rabbit brush as well, and it really likes cucumbers. Likes tomatoes, likes garlic. So that's something people may not have experienced, but if you see the orange silly string in your garden, just find every little fiber of it and get rid of it. And if a plant is too engrossed with it, just cut the whole plant out and put it in a plastic garbage bag, and the solar accumulation of solar heat and moisture will kill it, and you can throw it away. But anyway, that's a weed to keep your eye on if you don't have is dodder.
I don't have that. I was just reading up on it, and now I am very concerned.
Hey, Jordan.
Yeah, don't. You can keep ahead of it if you see it's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Let me throw out something here. We're talking about some of these things that grow naturally. So I wanted to throw out two things that happen here, and I'm not sure whether this is happens elsewhere. We end up with ground cherries popping up in different locations every year. And we end up with amaranth popping up every year in different areas. And, both of them are fine. In fact, the ground cherries, I put a high price on those. And hey, I got it too. They are just absolutely fantastic to pop that ground cherry out of the not its shell, but its leaves, and pop that in your mouth, and the taste of that just instantly, it's just something that, wow, it's that is something else. And the amaranth, we tried growing a 50-foot row of that one year. We thought we would harvest it and all of that good stuff for the flour. And the amaranth, we did, and I think we got a thimbleful of flour out of a 50-foot row. So we didn't try that again. But it is a beautiful, beautiful plant, amaranth.
Sorry, this is just my personal interest. What was wrong with the amaranth? Did it not grow, or it just doesn't put enough seed out?
Oh, the amaranth?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, it grew. It grew. That's not a problem. We just didn't know how to handle it. So
Because that is now, it's interesting you bring that up. I have seen that in like Whole Foods and Sprouts as specialty flour. And it's funny because I have a ton of it just growing just because it wants to grow. So I'm curious if there's ever a time when you have been able to say, well, this is already growing, so rather than treating it as a problem, let's find a market for it.
I can add something to that if I may. There are, talking about IPM, there are a lot of plants that in and around the garden that attract and provide a home for beneficial, not just insects but animals. I'm a birder. I get distracted by birds, so I love having hedgerows and things around the garden that attract birds. I like hearing them call in the trees. That's how I knew this morning. It's like we have to fix that high tunnel because I hear mom and dad quail and their little covey of chicks, and they're coming. And actually, my hearing was a little misdirected. They were actually already in there. But having a lot of birds around, having a lot of predatory birds are great for rodent control. Earlier this spring, I found a beautiful hog of a female garter snake one morning. Actually, Lonnie found it and called me. She was beautiful. She was over 3 feet long. And lo and behold, yesterday outside one of our pastures was this little 12-inch garter snake. And I was hoping that she would bear young, and she did, or her twin did, somebody did. But big female snake, and she was 2 inches in diameter. Just anyway, I get excited about all of the other creatures. And so providing habitat for other creatures really does help with an integrated pest management approach. It attracts things that are pests, but there's that balance. And if you get out of balance, if you pay attention to it like we try to, you can kind of make some adjustments to bring that balance back in. But having trees and shrubs and alyssum and parsley and different things that are growing in and around your growing area really does help establish a little ecosystem immediate to your production area that's quite beneficial, and it's pleasurable as well.
I have a 2 cents. It grows, we have a ton of it, Reno Food Systems, and we have green amaranth. And then we also have the one that's beautifully like that red, gorgeous purple. And since we've had chickens, they love it. And so we have the community garden and it pulls up quite easily. And then literally it's actually helping reduce cost of feed, you know. And I feel like it's quite nutrient dense. And I think the health trend, Jordan, is that it's gluten free. So it's a pretty high density, you know, crop or whatever, right, to grind down. And then people who are celiac or whatever can easily eat it. One of my ideas actually is to let it go to seed and then see if I can't sprout it as a microgreen and then distribute those seeds to the low-income senior housing facilities that I've been working with, because we're gathering once a week for about an hour, and I'm doing these workshops and stuff with them, and they have a lot of time. And so it's just a matter of, you know, and it's kind of good for tactileness and I don't know, you know, so that's kind of to give you the full gamut of the amaranth over here. That's what I was thinking of doing with it is, one, we feed it to the chickens, and then two, I'm going to experiment sprouting with it. I don't see why it wouldn't sprout. And I can imagine that it tastes just as good as every other microgreen.
Sure.
So that's kind of my fun idea with it.
Cool. Yeah, I got a huge plant, and so I'm waiting to see whether I'll get any seed off of it. Or it
Yeah.
just,
They're so pretty. And I like
they
what
are
Rob,
very-
you know,
It's a beautiful plant. It
gorgeous.
is beautiful. We planted some around our house and yard, and the quail got it. You know, it's a wet year. It's a bumper crop of baby quail. There's like little fuzzy peanuts on stilts. Even still, we saw some last week that were just newly hatched, and I don't know. We have just around the 5 acres around our house. But we have 200 quail, and they cover a lot of ground. But it's nice to have them.
Well, we're running up on our hour. Anyone have anything else to share? Ray, you look like you got a thought.
No,
I don't believe that, but I'll let you get away with it. Well, thank you all so much once again. Really enjoyed this conversation. So this will be on the website as well. Also, just want to ask if anyone has ideas for additional topics or like the sort of pre-conversation. Got any thoughts? Feel free to reach out to me, and then we will see you all again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Jordan, maybe on the network, we can put a little like survey or form